I don't know what it is, but lately I have been just having the best time with some fantastic reads. Hey everyone, welcome back to Andrew's Wizardly Reads, and as always guys, I'm Andrew. Today I've got another self-pub book review here for you. But before we get into that, make sure you're liking and subscribing so you can get regular updates for when I put out new content. And today I have got an amazing self-pub book that was brought to my attention from Kayla from Kay's Hidden Shelf. I have to thank her for really introducing me to this author. She's kind of the driving force, kind of leading this revolution for Nomads of the Sea by Kobe Zucker. And guys, this is a beefy, epic fantasy story with loads of just military combat, and there's a lot here, and we're going to talk about it. But I got to give a special shout out to Kay because thank you. This initially came to my attention because she was discussing the cover with the author. And this is Sig right here on the cover, and Sig is one of our main POVs. And you would think this has got some, possible romance vibes. No, not at all. This is just Sig being Sig. You can see he's kind of beat up. You can see his eyes are kind of got large irises and stuff like that. And there's a little bit of a water motif in the back. So this kind of fits the tone of the story. But I can promise you guys, this is not a romance story. He's just part of a nomadic culture. This is Nomads of the Sea, like I said, book 1 in the Fish Gut Guard. And let me tell you what, if the rest of the Fish Gut Guard is as good as this was, you can bet I will discuss every single one. Last I looked, this had a 4.89 rating on Goodreads. Nobody I know really doesn't like this. Now that said, this is still pretty much a kind of under the radar gem. But I'm going to tell you what, guys. From what I understand, Kobe Zucker took 3 months to write this. And then he spent the next 12 months editing and polishing this story. And it shows. This is one of the, seriously, one of the best, most polished stories I have read in a long time. This kind of rivals and may even surpass some of the traditionally published stuff that I have read. This is just chef's kiss. So good. Now let's talk about it. Basically, this story takes place mainly in the Nissi Archipelago, which has kind of been conquered by this greater kingdom. And so they are kind of having a little bit of a rebellion problem. And so they call in their conquerors. They're like, hey, come in, take care of this, and then you can keep using us for trade routes and stuff like that, and we won't kick up a whole lot of fuss. And they're like, oh yeah, sure, we've got our armor, and we've got our, strong bows and our big swords. This is nomadic culture, and they do combat differently. They do, combat on boats, a lot of nautical warfare, and so a lot of people who are used to fighting on land then try to challenge a bunch of nomadic people, and shenanigans ensue. That said, we have got 3 main POVs. We have got Bryn, we have got Sig, and we have got Idalia. Now, Sig right here is kind of like a nomadic prince. They are basically in the Nissi Archipelago. There are all of these great houses. Now, I will say, the naming conventions here do take some getting used to, but once you understand what a Nira is, which is just basically a houseboat, you're really not going to have any sort of issues following along. I'm going to try and say it, and I'm going to butcher it. Basically, he's the Mythosaic. Yeah. Anyway, it just basically means he's the nomadic prince of his house. And, Sig is discovering that he may not be a good person because he likes to fight, he likes to kill, he likes the thrill of combat, which kind of goes against the grain of his culture. And what's kind of interesting here, speaking of the word culture before we go into the other POVs, is that is something that this book handles incredibly well. Incredibly well is the fact, the difficulties that 2 cultures will face when they come together. There's a language barrier, there's a customs barrier. It's funny because Idalia shows up. Idalia is basically the daughter of, the magician, or the magical genius of, the kingdom. And her mother, I think it's Madeline Goss is her name. Or Madame Goss, I don't know. There's a lot of names in here. But essentially, She has been sent out because there's some strife back in the kingdom, which will be explored in the later books. It's kind of set up here in the first book, but that's going to be explored in the later books. Anyway, she comes to the Nissi Archipelago with her lover, the captain of, this military force who thinks they're going to just sweep these nomadic people. And she starts learning the language. She starts, practicing medicine, learning their ways. And she comes to find out that, the way, topography and the heights and the lows of the oceans and things of that nature can affect the magic within the nomadic people, which is called aethermancy, I believe is how that is pronounced. And basically, they breathe in this magical element into their lungs. And because they've got such strong lung strength from being deep water divers, and they can hold their breath longer, and they've got stronger lungs, and they're at a lower altitude, because it seems that this magic kind of doesn't exist in higher altitudes. It kind of sinks to the lower altitudes and higher concentrations, that the magic users here are incredibly powerful. And so she's kind of investigating that and learning about that. And it's just incredibly interesting to see these two cultures clash, because they don't really respect each other, and they each think that they're superior to the other, and it's just awesome. There's a third culture in here that's kind of up in the mountains, and they're more tribal, but I'd say they're almost Celtic, where they can transform into different animals. We've got a character who can transform into a giant bear, and one of the cool things that Sig can do, speaking of, is if he's diving into water. Now, not everybody in his culture can do this, but he can dilate his pupils so he can see better underneath water. He can grow webbing in his hands, things of that nature. He adapts to his environment. Very cool stuff. Next up, we have got Bryn, and Bryn is a captured, disgraced, fallen aethermancer. Basically, he was kind of like a war hero, or war criminal, depending on your definition of the term. And he was sent up into this prison in the mountains. I mentioned that the magic is thinner in the air, and the higher up you go. And so basically this prison is set up high because they can't pull any of the magic into their lungs to do what needs to be done. And so he is kind of sent up there, and when we meet him, he has just escaped. And we don't quite know how it has happened, but it was brutal on his body. He is basically suffering from frostbite. He has lost all of his appendages, fingers and toes, to frostbite. He's on the run. He's dealing with fever, and he is just an absolute wreck. And as we kind of dive into Bryn is trying to leave his past behind him. He wants to be this better person. And he, through his trials and tribulations of while he was in this mountain prison, he met somebody who made him want to be a better person. We kind of go through this journey with him where he is, fighting his, old nature with his new nature, and it's just fascinating because he wants to be a better person, but he doesn't know if he is a better person. And so there's a conflict of his identity there that's really fun to kind of explore. One thing that Kobe does amazingly well in this story is the little details, little callbacks. He will introduce just something that could be a throwaway line at the beginning of the book, and he will pick up that thread at the end of the book with just kind of this little rewarding moment. And so he does this multiple times throughout the story, and it just really enriches the story. I cannot tell you the amount of polish that is on this book. It is astounding. It is 780 pages, so like I said, it is beefy. But, I read 70 pages a day in this, and it just flew by. Unfortunately, I did crack the spine on this, and once it was cracked, I just started tearing through this book because, I was trying to be super gentle, I don't want to crack the spine, and then I accidentally cracked the spine, and I was like, okay, fine, let's just read. This one is an absolute delight. I love the character work here. I could not tell you if I had a favorite POV. Usually, a POV will rise to the top. And between Bryn, Sig, and Adalia, I couldn't tell you which one was my favorite because they're all compelling, they're all interesting, they're all well fleshed out. The combat in here is engaging and heart-pounding. One thing I will tell you that Kobe Zucker does here is there is just a matter-of-factness about this book, which kind of mirrors life a little bit. And essentially, what is going on here is the fact that in battle, people can die like that. Or in life, people can die like that. and bad things happen to good people. And I'm going to tell you what, like, there are moments where something will happen in this book and you're like, what? I can't believe he actually did it. And you're like, oh, well, it makes sense. Like, I mean, that they said that they were going to do it. And usually there'd be some MacGuffin or some, like, here comes the cavalry or some sort of trope like that to come and save a character that we have kind of grown fond with or attached to. And he won't do it. And instead, the bad thing happens, and you then have to deal with the emotional weight of that consequence, of that decision, of that choice. And so I really don't have a bad thing to say about Nomads of the Sea. This book was engaging, it was pulse-pounding, it was just so rewarding to read this book. I am so happy that I took a chance on Nomads of the Sea because initially, like, the cover, I was kind of skeptical. And what's between the front and the back cover is just pure brilliance, guys. Like, I know I do a lot of gush reviews, but really, if you're seeing a book review, it's probably because I loved the book or the series that I'm talking about. And this is definitely one that I loved. So guys, please, this is definitely one to check out. It is currently entered into SPIFBO 8, and I can see this one going very far, possibly even to the finals. That said, guys, please let me know in the comments down below if this is one that you are interested in picking up, or better yet, let me know a book that subverted your expectations, because you can't always judge a book by its cover. That said, guys, that's really all I've got here for you. So, as always, make sure you are liking and subscribing or hitting that Patreon if you want to support what I am doing here. Until next time, guys, peace out, stay magical, bye. And as always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons.